Ang kinakakam ang kinakasuda, Unangan way, Unangan sakta kuyach. I'm a contest Ilarion Merculieff, Tin Unangan way. I said the evening tastes good. That's the way we say it in Unangan, which is the people of the Bering Sea. We've been there for over 10,000 years and we're still there. And I said Angwan, which means hello, my other self. This is a way, again, we greet each other every day. And I usually like to use an example of a kitchen rubber glove. You blow it up, and these fingers think they're human when they're in fact one breath. And I got my traditional name when I was 4 years old by the last Kuyach that was left alive amongst my people. He gave me his name, and like was explained to me, like an arm extending out from the body, carrier of ancient knowledge into modern times, messenger, and that's all I am, is a messenger. And I had a very traditional upbringing, but unless anybody asks about it, I won't go too much into what that traditional upbringing was, except that the one important point about the way that I was raised is that the adult's responsibility was simply to create the space for me to learn, not tell me what I'm to learn, how I'm to learn, or define anything, or explain anything. Now that allowed me to expand out to the maximum of my potential. I didn't take the prescription of some other adult. I learned what I learned, the way I learned by myself. And that's the way that all the kids were raised. And today it might be called child abuse, but it's really the only way to recognize what a real human being is. And the real human being, my mother would tell me, our people cry when babies are born, and they celebrate when they die. And it's because being human ain't easy. We know that. And it means ups and downs and all kinds of stuff like that human being is. And then when we die, we go back to our original form. And that's the way we looked at things. And I was never scolded. How many of you have never been scolded? Raise your hand. Nobody? I was never scolded as a child. I tell that in my book where I stole $20 from my grandpa. I was 9 years old, and I wanted to buy this plastic airplane in the store. And so I stole the $20, went down there, and I bought the plane. And unbeknownst to me, my aunt was standing right behind me. So I knew I was caught. But she waited until I left the building. And she said in a very unaccusatory voice, "Larry, where did you get the money for that?" Of course, I knew I was caught. So I said, "Well, I stole it from my papa." And she goes like this, "What do you think you should do about that?" She left it up to me to decide what I should do. And I knew what to do. I said, "Well, I've got to turn the plane back in, get the money, and tell my papa I stole the money." And she goes, "Maroon, okay." Just like that. And then I go in, return the plane, get the money back. She took $20 out of her own pocket and bought the plane for me. Now, where's the genius in that, huh? Like, then I went home and told my papa, I stole $20 from you, Papa. And he says, "Echem lekocht lakaya." Good boy. Huh? You know, what is that? They're recognizing and affirming the positive behavior and ignoring the negative. And I never stole for the rest of my life. That was quite an upbringing. But probably the most important thing that I learned from my papa when I had to be with him 24/7 for 2 years at 4 years old. I went to church with him, I went to work with him, I went hunting with him. I was with him 24/7 so that he would get to know me and I would get to know him. And one day after we prayed, we were down in the Bering Sea and splashing water over ourselves, praying towards the east. And we finished up, and oh, by the way, that night we might go to the Russian Orthodox Church. He didn't see any difference in where you found your spirituality. And so then we went walking. It was a beautiful day. Blue sky, birds all around, and seals barking, and there was no wind, there were no clouds in the sky, it was sunshiny, the sea was calm, and I remarked, it was so beautiful, I said, it's really beautiful. And then he goes like this, Tuda, listen. And what he encapsulated is probably the reason our people survived and thrived in the Bering Sea for over 10,000 years. And that is that the most important things in life should not be defined. And we're living in a society that defines everything. And because these experiences are to be experienced, not talked about, experienced. And it's a funny thing because I co-authored a book called Stop Talking, and here I am doing nothing but talking. Universe has a sense of humor. Anyway, this way, then I learned from my Acha, who is a traditional, it's like it's a relationship between an older and younger person. And we see our Acha and we know instantly that's our Acha. It's not designated, it's not due to relationship. We see each other and we know that we are each other's Acha. So we call each other Acha. And the reason for that is that it was more of a spiritual connection than a relationship connection. It was, and I'll explain why. He took me under his wing from age 5 to age 13 and taught me much of what I know about ethics and values of being Unangan, about hunting, about fishing, about reverence for all life, about cooperation and sharing, and all these kinds of things that were central to our culture. But yet, from age 5 to age 13, he literally may have said no more than 200 words to me. Because words were not only considered superfluous, but maybe dangerous. And we're living in a society that puts words to everything. But I'll talk more about this later. And so I had a very blessed upbringing. And I'm very grateful for that. You know, you give me this award, which I'm very grateful for. This award is really an award in recognition of the contribution of my people and my ancestors and the land and the Creator. It's recognition of those things. And that's what I take away from this. And it's very good that the Sacred Fire Foundation gives those kind of awards. Not because of the person, but because of something greater. And this greater thing is needed now more than ever. I can't, well, you know, you mentioned that I work with elders from all over the world. That's very true. And so we have called a meeting of these elders from around the world to meet in Hawaii next month in special place. The Hawaiians and the Hawaiian elders have opened up their hearts and opened up the land to us. And they're going to welcome us in traditional Hawaiian ceremonies. And we're meeting, we've got South African Bushmen, the Kogi, and I suppose most of you have heard about the Kogi, right? We've got one of the 13 indigenous grandmothers. We've got Hawaiian elders. We've got youth. And for the first time, I think ever, we've got one white elder that will be part of the group. And they're going to discuss, we're going to start each day with ceremony. And so the second day will be the 13 indigenous grandmothers going to hold a ceremony. And then the next day will be the Kogi, and the final day will be the Bushmen and the Hawaiians. And the ceremonies are more important, I think, than the actual meeting and gathering of these elders. And I'll explain why. But anyway, these elders are coming together to deliberate what they see happening in the world now and what we need to do now, physically and spiritually. And I've been traveling all over the place sharing these messages from these elders. They say that human beings have very little time left. Human beings have very little time left. And we've got to act now. And this action they're talking about is about changing our consciousness. I mean, you've heard a lot about changing our consciousness, right? But what does it mean? And to the elders, they look at the world now and they see us focused on like what they call climate change, violence. There's people focused on the refugees. There's people focused on corruption in politics, and people focused on stopping wars, and there's a whole, stopping suicides, murders, the sicknesses that are going around. Everybody's focused on something. There are tens of thousands of issues. And the elders are saying they're looking in the wrong place. That we're focused on the symptoms, not the real underlying cause. And, one elder in Alaska, he said, they were radio tagging walrus, and he said, those scientists are not trying to find out where the walrus go to eat. They're trying to find themselves. And it's very true. And what we are not doing in this time is figuring out what's happening to human beings. What have we wrought? What is it that we have done that caused us to be here today in this situation with the world coming into greater and greater whirlwind of chaos and destruction? And, we are still, Einstein said you can't solve the problem with the same consciousness that created the problem. And when you look at what's happening in all the world and the best institutions and the highest technologies and pioneering efforts, they're focused on using the same consciousness which is in the mind. When the Yupik elders, they're in southwest Alaska, they say we live in a reverse society where we reversed all the laws for living. And there are many, you look at anything that we take for conventional wisdom, it's reverse of what is life affirming. And so the mind is now telling the heart what to do instead of the heart telling the mind what to do. We used to revere elders. Now we revere youth. We used to contemplate the mystery of death. Now we contemplate the mystery of life. Think about it. The science and technologies all trying to take apart pieces of creation and figure out what makes life. And when we know, it's common sense that the parts, the sum of the parts, acts synergistically. And the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. So you'll never be able to understand life by taking the pieces out. And the elders know this. And the elders see this, and they see very good-hearted people, all dedicated to trying to solve these problems with this consciousness. And when all we need to do is get the mind out of the way and get into the heart. Now I was very blessed to learn how not to think for hours when I was 6 years old. And it happened, I wrote that in my book too, I explained how that happened. But I basically learned it from the birds. St. Paul Island, where I was born and raised, magical island. We had about 1.4 million fur seals when I was there, when I was a little kid, and 2.5 million seabirds, and 1,000 reindeer and 500 Unangan people. Now you talk about magic for a kid to be raised that way. Oh, it is, I can't describe to you some of the things that I've experienced there. I'll try a little bit. One day I was out with the hunters, and we would go out in the dark before the birds show up, and we sit in the basalt boulders on the edge of the island waiting for these birds to come by. Then I was a little kid, and I heard this ringing sound, whistling sound. And I said, what the heck is that? And it became louder and louder. Then when the sun rose, I kid you not, the sky was filled with birds. Tens of thousands of seabirds. That was quite amazing to see that. The whole sky, the entire sky. There wasn't a blank space in the sky at all. That was quite amazing. But anyway, I learned that the best hunters are hunters who had the qualities ascribed to the feminine and to the masculine. Both the men had to balance the masculine and feminine within them. And so for feminine characteristics, is receptiveness, caring, sharing, cooperation, all these things the hunters had that. And they also had the ability, they learned from the birds too, they had the ability to drop out of thought. So when we're hunting stellar sea lions, they're not like California sea lions. You know, they're much bigger and wilder. And we hunt from shore to water because the sea lion, when we hunt the sea lion, it's spring, fall, and winter, the times when it's not breeding. And we do that because we want the population to continue. And it's colder in the land than it is in the water. And so they prefer to stay out in the water. And during those months, it's too rough to launch a boat. So we have to hunt from shore to water. And I would be out there, I started going out there when I was 5. My archer would take me out when I was 5 years old. And I would get daydreamy or sleepy by noon. We'd get out there about 5 o'clock in the morning. But by noon, I would just, you know. And it was so easy to do that. Sometimes we'd wait for 8 hours for one sea lion to come by that would come by, stick its head up for a few seconds and go. And so the hunters never got daydreaming. And they weren't very active. They didn't talk very much. They were very quiet, sitting patiently on the basalt boulder. And I thought, how do the hunters do that? That is so magical. And then all of a sudden somebody would say, kawa kako, sea lion coming. And instantly, I mean instantly, we'd be 5 or 6 hunters out there. Instantly, all 5 or 6 hunters would look at the same spot in the ocean without anybody pointing or even looking. They turn their head and they're on the spot. So I looked at the spot and I looked and I looked and I looked. No sea lion. But they were still looking, so I'm pretty sure there must be a sea lion there. 10 minutes later, a sea lion would pop up at the exact location where they were looking. Now that's, mind you, on an island at the 180 degrees of water, and the sea lion could be anywhere, but they show up where the hunters are looking. And what I learned was the magic of being a real human being is the ability to suspend thought in the present moment. Now, I didn't have words for it when I was 6 years old, but I noticed these birds, these tens of thousands of birds would be flying in every which direction at different speeds and different heights, and in front of a cliff, there might be 10,000 seabirds, and none of them even tripped a wing. And I wondered, how do they do that? And I didn't have words for it at the time. But essentially I said, well, the birds don't think. I was 6 years old. They don't think. They're worried about what happened yesterday or tomorrow. They're just there. And so I said, okay, I'm going to try that. I'm going to be like a bird. I want to be a bird. And so at 6 years old, I said, okay, the birds don't think, the birds don't think. And sure enough, after about a couple months, I got to the point where I could not have a single thought in my head for hours. And then I tried that when I was hunting. And you know what? The magic happened. I could feel the sea lion before it arrived. And then I use it for fishing. You know, we fish hand line and hook the line sinker for halibut. And I can tell you that that's when I started using it for halibut fishing. I could tell you when the halibut is just going over the line. When what it's doing actually down there. And what it's doing is, there are many different ways, but to give you one example, they have a lateral line at the length of their white side of their body. That's a sensing organ. And they move over the bait sensing it. And I can tell you when it's going to bite the line. And I can tell you once it bites the line, whether or not it's a 3-foot halibut, 4-foot halibut, 5-foot halibut, I can tell you whether or not it's male or female. I can tell you whether or not it's hooked by the lip or the jaw or the side of the body. And I can tell you how it's going to fight on the way up. All of these things because of a one-on-one relationship with the animals. I can tell you what the sea bottom is. If it's sand bottom or rock bottom, big rocks, little rocks, I can tell you that. Just by feeling the energy that is around. You can tell that just by suspending thought. Because in the real human being makeup is the intelligence of the whole makeup of the human being. And it's not just in the mind. It's in our senses. And it's in our intuition, our heart sense, our gut feel. All of these things, when the mind is not operating, synergistically interacts with each other and quickly comes up with a solution. Very quick. It's very quick. And these ways are an essential part of the real human being. And it means, you know when we left the present moment, when time began? Time began when we left the present moment and we sunk into guilt, shame, remorse, anger, rage, jealousy, all these things that are in the past, or fear, which is projection to the future or something that hasn't happened yet. Every place except now. And the point of power is in the present moment. And Deepak Chopra said, you know, God can be found only in the silence between one's thoughts. And how many people live in the silence between one's thoughts? And so I go around talking about this because the elders say that in order to know what you must do during this time, you've got to be present and you've got to be in your heart. And your heart will tell you what you must do. Not everybody else, just you. And dropping into your heart and following your heart, what your heart says, is not easy. Because it may mean doing, abandoning whatever you're doing. You know, it took me, when I was about 30 years ago, I did that. I was pretty successful in the patriarchy. I was vice chair of a $3 billion company. And lots of things like that. And then I decided I'm going to drop it. I'm just going to drop it. I'm going to drop all the things that that is considered conventional wisdom. And I resigned off of 17 boards and councils. And I didn't plan my career for the first time in my life. Everybody thought I was crazy. But I did it. And it's part of my upbringing. Without my upbringing with my elders, that never would have happened. And when you get to that place, you know that you trust in yourself, you trust in your heart, you trust in life, you trust the universe, and you trust, well, it makes you see things like, I know. I don't believe anything. I don't believe anything. I know what I know. And we are not to talk about things we don't know. And so I'm talking about things that I do know. And it's freeing. We think about how the imbalanced masculine has taken place. Our stories go about 4,000 to 6,000 years ago, the last imbalance happened, the masculine imbalance, and we're still in it today. And the elders say nothing is created outside until it's created inside first. We trash the environment outside because we're trashing the environment inside. We judge others on the outside because we're judging ourselves first. We criticize others because we're criticizing ourselves first. I mean, nothing is created outside until it's created inside first. And when you look at it that way, you begin to understand why the world is as it is now, with all the things that we are doing. And the masculine imbalance is based on top-down, linear, control, fear, all these kinds of things. It's imbalanced masculine. There was an imbalanced feminine at one time, or more than one time, that threw us out of the present moment. So we're all culpable. And now we're faced with serious threat to not Mother Earth. She has survived for billions of years. She'll survive for billions more. It's we human beings that are in question. And whether or not we get it is still up in the air. But these things that are happening now with wars and climate change, what they call climate change, we call climate crisis, the famines that are happening, the dry air that's coming in, the wet air that's coming. And you know, in Alaska, you never hear this in the news. One year we had, the porcupine caribou herd. There are millions of them, and they crossed the Yukon River to go up to the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. But one year, the Yukon River didn't freeze. And the mothers had to follow what their intelligence was saying, which was to go to the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge where they're birthing new young. But in the meantime, these young ones followed their mothers, and 300,000 caribou died in one day. That's just the tip of the iceberg. Things are getting worse, and we're looking at solving these problems by addressing the symptoms. And the elder said, go to your heart. Your heart will tell you what you need to do. Okay, thank you very much. And I'll be glad to answer any questions. Good.
There's a brave one.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so I'm very curious about the environment itself, the earth itself, and the councils that you are part of, and very, very interested in how wisdom becomes powerful, because we have this notion of what's powerful, and especially regarding how the planet is being taken care of or not. So could you say what you are experiencing now in terms of these councils of wisdom, and how the power of that wisdom can become more powerful
Yeah, I can talk. Thank you for asking that question. Um, the wisdom of these elders, there's going to be a counterpart meeting in New York. It'll be in the same month, but it'll be later than ours. And one is going to be more masculine, and the other is going to be more feminine. The one in Hawaii will be more feminine. And but we balance each other out. And the group that's coming from the world to New York, they're addressing the same issues we are. And what we're going to do is videotape what the elders want to share with the world. And then we're going to interpret it into many different languages. Mandarin, Chinese, Spanish, French, Portuguese, Hebrew, Arabic, Japanese, Hungarian. I mean, there's going to be many different languages this is going to be out on. And we're going to show each elder's message intact, but in pieces, because people don't pay attention to something that's going to last, who knows how long an elder talks. We know how elders talk. Anyway. Anyway, we're going to cut them up into maybe 10-minute pieces, and it's going to be broadcast as a series. And we have many volunteer organizations that have agreed to feature this, and we have 2 organizations that are conducting world meetings where, like one of them is a World Environmental Organization that is going to meet in China next year, and they're going to feature two of our elders that go to this meeting in Hawaii. And then another one is what is that called? It's an international religious, World Council of Religions. Yeah, they're going to meet in Canada next year, and they're going to feature our elders there too. And so, and then we're going to hopefully build a platform where we can interact with young people, because young people, they're amazing. You ever notice, I mean, I notice this everywhere, where a 20-year-old might come to me and tell me something that it took me 40 years to learn. Ah. Yeah. And, these young ones that are coming up already knowing who they are. Like, you watch America's Best, or whatever you call that, America's Dancing or Singing or whatever it's called. These young ones are like I watched a classical pianist at 5 years old. He knows already what it takes a lifetime for people to learn to become a master. And I know a 5-year-old elder. That elder, he speaks 4 languages fluently. No one ever taught him. And the elders go to him to remember the old words. They're coming in real special these days. And so, so we hope to develop programs where we can interact with the youth, with the elders. And so, in answer to your question, part of the answer is use of the modern media that has been misused and abused and everything else. But hopefully, we will use that as an introduction to listening to your own heart, and who knows what else will develop from this. I mean, we're approaching it with whatever happens, happens, and so we will adjust our thing based on whatever happens. And so I don't know, and the elders, they say, Okay, you can go out there and offer what you have. But whether or not anybody picks it up is none of your business. That's really good advice. And I have to say one other thing is that one of the elders in Alaska and I were exchanging all tape recordings, and he said, anybody who has to speak in front of a group of people and read from a piece of paper has no business there. Oh boy. You know, I before that I used to read my speeches all the time. And I listened to them and and it does. The magic happened. I slipped from my brain to my heart. And it's only that, and I used to wonder how elders could speak so eloquently, and that's how. They're speaking directly from their heart. And it's the only way we can communicate, really. 98% of human communication is not words. It's our body language, it's our energy, it's all these different kinds of things that when you're in the heart, you become very aware of. Does that answer your question?
I'm curious, given your upbringing, how did you find yourself being responsible for a $3 billion company and getting into the corporate role?
No?
I can see how someone with your wisdom was able to get there, but how did you find yourself getting there?
Well, the elders I grew up with, they taught me through their actions and words and demeanor that there's no obstacle in life. You can do anything you want to do. And so I grew up that way. So when I tell the story in the book too, I was 15 years old in a boarding school, government boarding school. It was a BIA boarding school, Bureau of Indian Affairs. And they wouldn't let us kiss our girlfriends goodnight. And they wouldn't let us hold their hands. And so I circulated this petition. I didn't think about any obstacles. I just wrote this petition. We, the undersigned students of Mount Edgecombe, demand to be treated as young adults and have a say in our rules of our conduct. And every single student, the 600 body student, signed it, every one of them. Then I turned it into the superintendent's office. That evening I got a phone call from the superintendent himself, and he says, come over for dinner. So I go there, and he says, okay, we'll agree with you and give you a blank check to do what you want, as long as it isn't disruptive for the school. So the next day I met with student council, proposed that the first rule of order would be we get to hold our girlfriend's hand and we get to kiss them goodnight. And I became big man on campus. I am not kidding. And then I became the first male president of the girls' dormitory. First ever, and I think the last one. And when I went to the University of Washington, I was, after my freshman year, I noticed that only 4 people in the school of university of 34,000 students identified themselves as Native American. So I said, hey, this is not right. I want to meet people like me. And so I said, well, I'll go see the president. I didn't think about any obstacles. I went in at 18 years old, and I told the president, secretary, I'd like to see the president. And she said, do you have an appointment, sir? No, I don't have an appointment. Well, he's very busy. So I said, that's all right, I'll just sit here and wait for him. So the woman, she she got, I don't know, she was endeared with me or something. She went in and told the president that I'm out there. So she came out and said, well, he'll see you for a few minutes. So I went in there and I told him what I found out, that you have a university with 22 Indian reservations that's in the state, Washington State, and you got 4 people who identify themselves as Native American. And I said, you should be ashamed of yourself. And he says, well, I guess you're right. Why don't you start the program? And that's how I became the first Native American who ran the Indian education program at the University of Washington. And it goes on and on from there. The words have power. The words we use in our brains have power. And if you see things in terms of obstacles, difficulties, things that you'll say, no, that's not possible, you're blocked. Those words have power and they will freeze you. When you don't have those words, you are free to do whatever you want to do. And I ain't kidding. It's whatever you want to do. Yeah. Take one more question? Yes.
Can you just talk just a little bit about growing up, like how you say you were given the space to learn things on your own and discover things on your own, like what that looked like? I mean, did you play with kids and
Yeah.
learn from each other?
Okay, I should explain that. In the traditional way, I spend equal time with the men, with the women, with the elders, and with my peers. Equal time, very well orchestrated. And so from the men, I learned hunting and fishing and all the things that men do. And from the women, I learned women's ways. And then from the elders, they'd take me out camping with them and they would tell stories. And that's all they did. They'd tell stories and I'd listen to them for hours, for days, for weeks, for years. And my job with the kids, my peers, play. That was it. And, you know, we would go out, you know, I'd listen to the seagulls early in the morning through the window. There would be a bunch of seagulls out there, and they would tell me what kind of weather it is out there before I even look out the window. They would tell me if it's no wind in the day, it's blue skies, there's snow on the ground, and then I knew, oh boy, this is going to be a day to go sledding. And we'd sled and go sledding all day and all night. And that just, it's magical to be raised that way. Then I was allowed to go anywhere on the island, day or night, without any restriction. We don't have any predators on that island. And the only danger is if you're not aware by falling down off a cliff or something. And it would be considered child abuse today. But I would walk out of the village at 3 o'clock in the morning, pitch black, and go 3 miles to this bird cliff and 3 miles back, 6 miles for a 6-year-old child. And what we did is we'd walk out there and there are no street lights. And most of the time in the Bering Sea, it's foggy or cloudy. We have 20 days of sunshine a year in the Bering Sea. And so it would be pitch black. And you'd have to get into your body and trust your body will know what to do, where to go, and how to be safe. Not your mind. So I would never be in my mind. I would just be in my body going along. And I'd get there safely. So that's another way that I learned. And we have games like that, where we would have a central place in the middle of the hills, and it'd be pitch black out. We wait for right conditions for that. and then call the kids together and then get them spread out for miles away from the camp, turn all the camp lights out, and you have to find your way back in pitch black. That's something. Then we have a game where we it goes on and on. But I'll tell you this one last game. We would walk backwards with our eyes closed next to the ocean. And the object is to see if you can navigate with your eyes closed evenly between the ocean and the land. That was fun. Okay. Well, thank you all very much.